Hello and welcome to the Live Before Lock edition of the CFB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and we are doing our thing leading into week 5. We had a couple of small weekday slates to wet the whistle, as they say, and now we're delving into this massive day of college football. We have the 12-game main slate here on DraftKings. We have an all-day main on FanDuel. We have a FanDuel early slate with Minnesota on it. We've got the 6-game night slate, which will be coverage for a little bit later via a written article. We also have the 3-game late night slate, which has Alabama on it, interestingly enough, Fresno State versus Nevada, and Washington, your Washington Huskies, America's team, really, against Arizona. So a fun one there. Doesn't stop. We'll be talking about football all day long. Let's get into it. So the way this works, the Live Before Lock, pretty much just checking on news, answering any last minute, this or that questions, strategic questions, anything at all really that you want to know or have on your mind. While we're waiting for some of those to come in, I will go ahead and reiterate any of my core plays or anything that's changed for me since Thursday night when we last really saw each other, and go from there. Highlight projected, or what I would think to be kind of the top 5 highest owned at each position, and then any touchdown calls or any sneaks or anything like that that's come to me in the last couple of days. So I appreciate those of you who are watching right now. Thanks, Chase, for checking in. Let's go ahead and start us off with just circling around and talking about the overall where my head is at for a core, and this being like, hey, I'm running these 3 players in my primary lineup, and there will be very few in which I don't have them. Really, for me, that's Seth Hennigan at quarterback for Memphis. Now, at the beginning of the week when the slate first dropped, I thought, okay, Hennigan probably won't draw a huge amount of ownership. I think people will go to Caleb Williams. I think, Hudson Card's always cheap. People are going to be there. There's a couple of other options. But now it looks like as the week's gone on and people really recognize, like, hey, this USC-Colorado game, it's got a high total, but USC, man, they have so many mouths to feed. The running backs are splitting. It's really like Caleb Williams or bust, I think. So I have all this other games to target. What am I going to do? Memphis, Boise State, that looks like it's going to be high scoring. Prices are a little bit more reasonable. And I think Seth Hennigan has really kind of come into the mix and likely, a top 3 highest owned, at least on DraftKings main slate here on the slate at $8K. It's just a really cheap price for him. And he's looked very good. And he has a high floor. So safety there with Hennigan. And then the other 2 members of the core, and very chalky this week, are 2 running backs in Blake Watson of Memphis, again sticking with that Memphis theme, and Ashton Jenny from Boise State. Even with the prospect of Holani coming back, or when he finally does and is cleared and is going to get work, it's just they can't afford to take Ashton off the field regardless. Holani's going to get in there, kind of not a plotter per se, but not nearly as electric as Ashton. He'll get some short yardage stuff. He'll definitely take some looks away. But what we love about Ashton is the fact that this man is getting so many looks in the passing game, and he's just so hard to bring down. You look at it as a rusher, 5.6 YPC, over 400 yards. Like, that's really solid for the first quarter of the season. But he's already 3rd on the team with targets in 21. Has caught 19 of those for 294 yards and 2 touchdowns. A lot of those are just little dump offs, right? And he's just doing the rest with it. Almost 300 receiving yards, actually is over 700 all-purpose yardage. Ashton Genty is the guy. 6.8K, Blake Watson 6.5K. Both are expected to have well over 50% ownership. I'm just plugging that in. I'm not trying to get too cute, too fancy with any of that. I'm just running those in. Question from Jace. Are you pairing Seth with somebody in your main? So the main decision for me right now is if for one of my last receiver spots, and just so we're clear, because I've already been getting asked if I'm doing 4 running backs. We're not. We've only had that one chance to do 4 running backs. There are decent options on this slate, but it's 2 quarterbacks, and I'm actually looking at a wide receiver, technically a tight end, in the flex spot. So it would make sense to pair with Hennigan. My favorite option for that would be Rock Taylor. And it's not just because he's the most expensive or at the top or something. Well, it's just you look at it. Let's break this down. Let's get the let's get the snaps report that I have and targets. So he's really looked good. We saw early in the season, we're still early in the season, but when Memphis was on the slate one other time, Demir Blankumsey, he was really, really chalky, and he had been good early on, but with Joseph Skates back, took work from him, and Rock Taylor, really has that great rapport with Hennigan, and then Blake Watson getting all this receiving work. It's really, really established in the pecking order: Rock Taylor, Blake Watson, and then everybody else. Rock Taylor does lead the team in targets with 29, 21 catches, 300 yards, and a touchdown. Touchdown equity is the same as everybody else, but he's just going to get peppered with targets a whole lot. Now, looking at I have a snaps report here so we can really get into this. Got to get this a little more sortable. Okay, come on, where you at? All right, so Rock Taylor, roughly 73% of the snaps. You look at the rest of the receivers, Blankumsey about 59, Skates 53, Kobe Drake 42, Toski Dove down there around 27, although Dove did play 32 snaps in the last game, which was his season high. But you're playing Rock Taylor a whole lot. They know how good he is. Him and Watson together with Hennigan makes a pretty nice triple stack. I know it's usually unconventional to play a running back with a quarterback, but we know at the collegiate level, at least, it works very well and is sometimes optimal, more often than people realize. And also the fact that Watson is just he's a pass catching machine right now. So Rock Taylor is definitely my favorite. If you want to get a little different and you want a GPP shot, I do like Joe Skates. His targets in 3 games, he missed 1, or 15, 9 catches, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's really only probably going to give you like 3 targets and catch, or maybe 4, catch like 2 of those, but he's got touchdown equity and somebody, sub 5.5K that can definitely pan out here. And I think his target is going to continue to go way high. He's going to pass Kobe Drake in the pecking order, probably Blankumsey as well. So you can use Joe Skates if you're looking for somebody else. Otherwise, Rock Taylor. And really for me, it's like Rock Taylor or Juice Williams. And I think I'm probably leaning Juice Williams, who's also going to be very chalky, just because I do want exposure to that Illinois game. I don't know that I have the grapefruits, as they would say, to play Luke Altmaier in my main, even though it's a great spot. So to get exposure to that Illinois team against Purdue, which should be fantasy friendly, is with Juice Williams. But a long-winded answer there. Rock Taylor is the guy that I would be pairing with Seth Hennigan. A little sad to see Henny getting so much ownership here late. Core-wise, we'll switch to FanDuel real quick because we're getting a lot more people. FanDuel, man, don't call it a comeback, but FanDuel, getting popular again perhaps. They didn't really do much with their college product the last couple of years, and for CBB last year until late February, they were running showdowns and really not caring. Seems like they're offering more for college football. They have that all-day slate. They have the early only, so there's a lot going on here, and FanDuel's now working their way back, and the pricing is super soft. The only thing that sucks about this particular slate or this particular day for FanDuel is the pricing is extraordinarily soft, and it allows you to pay up at quarterback, which you should definitely be doing on FanDuel. Core-wise there, Jaden Daniels, prioritizing him regardless of format. Going up against Ole Miss, I think that the Ole Miss defense is going to be very hard pressed to contain Jaden Daniels. Jalen Milroe, who has not looked all that great so far for Bama, didn't put up huge numbers, but he was extremely accurate against Ole Miss. And then when Ole Miss, they put the beat down on Georgia Tech, but Haynes King, he was really, really good, threw for over 300 yards against Ole Miss. A couple of touchdowns, just very, very sharp. So I think Jaden Daniels is primed and ready to absolutely smack against Ole Miss. And it's going to be a fun game for sure. But I just trust him to make plays against this team. And ultimately, I think you can't fade Jaden Daniels right now on either side. We don't have him on the main on DK, but on FanDuel, you should definitely be playing him. Running back wise, I love Amani Bailey against West Virginia. I think there's some sneak there at 9-3, but Taj Brooks being 7-4 for Texas Tech, that game against Houston. He's got to be your core running back on FanDuel. Very cheap. We know Tyler Shuck is banged up. We're going to see Morton there at quarterback. They're going to hand off the ball a lot to Brooks. Back-to-back weeks over 100 yards, 7.4K. He should probably be priced higher. Somewhere in the 8.5 to 9K range for the workload that he's had, the production that he's had, and he's really not. So you got to go there as well. And then at wide receiver, makes sense if you can afford it, and you probably can for like Brent Thomas, Malik Neighbors, but Dran Bradley on the other side here at 8-4, another Texas Tech guy. I really like him. The Texas Tech passing offense, of course, it's got a lot of mouths to feed as well, but there's an established pecking order there. And even with Shuck on the sidelines, Bradley's still going to get hit targets by a fair margin. 8-4 is a really reasonable price for him. I think the Tennessee receivers are also worth looking at, but for like in the 5K range. But Bradley is definitely the core there for me on FanDuel. And there's a lot of cheap options. We know Brock Bowers is really cheap there on FanDuel. They're just totally broken with several of these options here. And you can easily fit Jaden Daniels. And if you want, Caleb Williams as well, who's 12.8K on FanDuel there. But you just go ahead and plug in the top two quarterbacks there, submit your salary, and then go ahead and get all these rest of these underpriced guys, and you'll be just fine over on FanDuel today for sure. All right, Brett Melke, any favorite punt wide receivers you are considering? So I have one that's like kind of hanging my hat on and calling my shot, if you will. If you sub to the content and you saw the main from yesterday, my main write-up, I do have a affinity for Colston Loveland from Michigan, sophomore tight end, sitting there under 5K. I know we're already on Jatavian Sanders. He's a main team play for us for sure. You can run a cheap line. You can run like 3 tight ends on your DK lineup with Loveland, Sanders, and Jalen Conyers from ASU and really not have any problem at all fitting Caleb Williams if that's your gig and you want to do that. But Colston Loveland definitely as a receiver, a combo blocking, receiving tight end. I think he's in for a pretty big game today. No competition for him for targets at tight end with Eric all gone. He's really been productive without anyone noticing. We know that, all the attention is paid to Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Corum scoring touchdowns, Edwards not really doing anything. And then, of course, as far as Michigan receivers go, our guy Roman Wilson, who up until last week had been a touchdown scoring machine. So Loveland's quietly been putting together a really solid first quarter of the season, 14 catches, 168 yards, has not caught a touchdown yet, but he has been targeted 16 times. And he does operate in that quote unquote safety valve, baby blanket type of spot there in the offense. There's a ton of hype surrounding him by Michigan this week. Harbaugh's talking about, he's a little known kid in Idaho and has just played his way. And they're expecting big things out of him. And I think it's really only a matter of time before he does score a touchdown. And I think this is the spot for him to do so. Going up against a team in Nebraska that has shown decently on the defensive end. But I think Loveland's going to end up, catching a touchdown. I don't know that he has like this giant, like 5 for a 150 type of game or something like we saw to Sanders recently, but I am calling my shot with him on touchdown. I do have an anytime touchdown prop in with Colston Loveland as well. That is my favorite cheapie. Now there are other cheapies, depending on how low you need to go. And if you need even lower than that, there are a few guys who I did highlight in the Discord. And these are more GPP shots, but if you did want to go with USC exposure, Mike Jackson, you have Tyrone Broden, the MAC transfer, and then Monroe Young. If you want some Cal exposure, that's not the chalky Jeremiah Hunter. Monroe Young is somebody that you can certainly look at. And I don't have any issue doing so. Tyrone Broden actually for Arkansas last week caught his first touchdown with them. Of course, he transferred over from Bowling Green. He's only 3.5. Somebody against Texas A&M that I think could actually do quite well. KJ Jefferson looking his way as Andrew Armstrong gets most of the attention from the defense. Broden has an opportunity there to pay off that 3.5 price tag. So there's a couple options there for you. Jamie, jumping late. Do you have a preferred QB2? I'm between Schrader and Card. Kind of thinking Clemson wins and covers today. Just a matter of how many points both put up. Man, Jamie, you've been locked in on the betting side of things the last couple of weeks. So I hate hearing that you will think Clemson wins because I actually love Garrett Schrader today. I think he is a very strong play. The field is going to go back to Hudson Card. He's been chalked the last couple of weeks because Purdue, we know they've got a lot of passing volume. He's cheap. He just, just like Aiden O'Connell for us last year, remains cheap. He's going to have that volume. But Hudson Card he doesn't really move it for me. And he was much less exciting than O'Connell. Like I felt confident we'd plug O'Connell into our lineups there at, 5, 7 and 6K. And eventually his price went up. We could confidently know like this man's going to throw for 350 plus yards because he's going to absolute chuck it. Hudson Card, I don't have that same level of confidence in him, but we do know he's going to throw 30 plus, no doubt about it. But if you're asking, gun to the head, which one, it is Garrett Schrader for me. I love the matchup. I know that Clemson, historically in the last half decade to decade, like, oh, we don't target Clemson. Their defense is too good, but clearly not the same team, right, that they have been. There's still a bunch of pros on their program, no doubt. But if you look at the first few games of the season here and what type of profile has given them trouble, it's been mobile, dual threat style quarterbacks. Now, early in the season, first week, in fact, Riley Leonard, 98 rushing yards, scored a touchdown, looked good in making his reads, throwing passes, really kind of smacked Clemson in the mouth. Now, last week, Jordan Travis didn't get it going in terms of yardage, but he did score a rushing touchdown, and he wasn't having really any problem at all throwing the football. It seems like they were really worried about his legs and tried to contain him there, but he was able to make throws to the absolute studs that he has in his receiver room. So that is something that Schrader, even with Gadsden out for the year, he has receivers that he's comfortable with. If they try to sell out to stop the run, he can make those throws. His offense is simplified. He looks really, really good. So I'm feeling quite excited about Garrett Schrader. Do I think he'll rush for 200 yards and 4 touchdowns like he did it against Purdue? Probably not. Would I love that to happen? Obviously. But I do think he settles in somewhere between 25 and 35 fantasy points. Clearly, we want that higher end there, but it's not a total death blow if he doesn't. And I think he has a built-in safe floor for us here. And the good news is he's only 7'4". Now, I know Hudson Card, depending on what you're trying to do with the rest of your lineup, is 6'6". But I think Schrader, man, he's just got total control of this offense. I got the anytime touchdown prop with him. It's going to have to be a rushing. Obviously, he could catch a receiving, but that's another one that I just feel very comfortable with and confident in. So that's where I'm at. 3 running back build. It can be. I think I prefer – this is the second week in a row, and I hate well, I shouldn't say that, but I just typically I'm not that comfortable with 4 wide receiver builds on DraftKings because historically running backs have been so safe and so good for us. But I said on Thursday, and I can admit it, just like we pat ourselves on the back for good calls, we have to own the bad ones. And running backs has not been the best this season. There has been plenty of chalky running backs that have, quote unquote, shat the bed. And I think receivers have really, really, been paying the bills lately. So there's some cheap ones here. But I think, again, this is going to be the second week in a row for me where I roll 4 wide receivers / tight ends. But if you do run with 3 running backs, there's obviously outside of Genty and Watson, there are several options that you can look at depending on what you're doing with Jatavian Sanders. If you're not using him, then I think you want to go with Jonathan Brooks there to get some Texas exposure. I don't think you need to necessarily stack them up with Ewers and Sanders and Worthy, but in your main build, Brooks is definitely a guy. Devin Neal, always in play. He's only 6K. It's like he was super chalky last week. Everybody's going to be jumping off this week, but he's still a super, super involved in this offense. And yes, it's a harder matchup on the road, but he's probably going to score a touchdown, and he's only 6K. You have LaQuint Allen for Syracuse. Don't love the matchup, but the volume's there. Blake Corum is clearly just, a step ahead of the rest. Donovan Edwards, they're actually, interestingly enough, playing similar snaps, Edwards and Corum, but Corum is handling far more carries in terms of percentages and touches. 8-3 is a lot to pay, but obviously still good there. Rocket Sanders back for Arkansas. Cam Scatterbo for ASU was throwing passes last week, getting catches, running the ball. So you've got some potential there for a Wildcat-esque type running back. So yeah, it's definitely in play. There's a myriad of ways you could go. You have Jaden Ott from Cal, who I always love. If you're looking for GPP guys, the Penn State running backs, I mean, they haven't done really anything this year, but there's only going to be a matter of time before one or both, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, blow up the slate, and everybody's going to be like, damn, how could we not see this coming? Well, we see it coming. It's just a matter of when, not if. So, yeah, I don't mind that. Oh, and Jalen Lucas. Jalen Lucas is a Jake Kucheck guy. I don't love the spot for him either, but he's getting a lot of, work in the passing game, and he is getting enough to pay off the meager 4.6K price tag. So if you don't want one of those cheap receivers and you want to trust somebody who's at least going to get some volume, Jalen Lucas at 4.6 is potentially that guy for you. Let's see here. Zakir injury updates for USC. Zach Branch to miss. So that is a big time target out of action there. Still plenty of other guys on the team there for USC to have to worry about. There's still a ton of cannibalization, if you will, of those targets. Removing Branch from the equation, you still have Dorian Singer. You still have timeless, been in college forever. It seems like Taj Washington, Brendan Rice, of course, Super Mario. You have the hybrid tight end, Deuce Robinson. You have Mike Jackson, Lake McCree, who was down there at 3.5. I like him for Lake McCree as a GPP one-off. And then you still have, Kieran Hudson. So there's still a ton of mouths to feed. I wouldn't overreact to that just yet, but there is one less guy for you to have to worry about if you're making some GPP builds in that USC game. All right, circling back around. I don't know what you're meaning there. How would you rank the Syracuse wide receivers? All right, Spuds, let's pull up Syracuse. First thing I want to do is look at snaps, and then I want to pull up the targets. Let's do that now. Such a shame that they weren't going to have Gadsden this year, because Gadsden was going to turn in a massive season had he been healthy. All right. Oh, man, I have so many teams on this snap report. 1 second. There we go. All right. We're there. So right now, the two receivers playing majority or most of the snaps are Donovan Brown, who's actually very cheap, and Damian Alford. If you look at the target report, Damian Alford currently leads the team with 25 targets, 17 catches, 250 yards, and a touchdown. Donovan Brown, who is very cheap, 23 targets, 17 catches, 260 yards. And then Umari Hatcher, who just had a big game, 22 targets, 11 catches, 204 yards. Lesser known, but equal touchdown equity is Isaiah Jones, 8 catches, 157 yards, 2 touchdowns on 13 targets. Much more productive on his lesser targets. So ranking them, I have them as the following. Come on. I think price shouldn't matter. So, like, here's the thing. If you're not playing Isaiah Williams and you want a Syracuse guy, or you want to pair somebody with Schrader, then you have that 5.8 for Alford. I think I would rank them, and this would probably be the opposite of most because of Donovan Brown's price, but Damian Alford 1 at 5.8. And I know that the targets are similar there, but Schrader has tended to lean on one particular guy in close games or kind of focus in on one player. And I think Alford's going to get peppered today. Donovan Brown 2nd, and then Umari Hatcher 3rd. So 5.8K, 4.8K, and 5.2K there. Those are the 3 that I'd really look at. I wouldn't get involved with any of the other receivers unless you're looking for deep GPP. You've got Jones, who I mentioned there, but there's not a lot of other options that I feel like you need to look at especially with LaQuint Allen getting targets out of the backfield. He's actually 5th on the team in targets right now with 12. So that's how I would rank the Syracuse wide receivers. All right. Next up, Sanders on Arkansas, too cheap. Assuming you mean for FanDuel, 6K. Yeah, I just don't know that they're going to suddenly, boot Rashad Dubinion out of all the carries. GPP wise, you want to throw a Rocket Sanders lineup out there. That's totally fine. Because he is cheap, obviously at 6K, but I don't know that he's coming into a huge workload immediately just because of how good Dubinion has been. If anything, AJ Green is probably just getting kicked to the sidelines and not going to get too many touches. FanDuel favorites, any position, I suppose, eh? Jaden Daniels, obviously, but like KJ Jefferson at 8.5 is still really, really cheap on FanDuel. They have some guys you can really take shots with. Baron Morton of Texas Tech sitting there at 7.8. Timmy McClain at 8.6 is really interesting for UCF. I think they're going to put up some points on Baylor. And you also have Donovan Smith, who kind of burned people a few weeks back, sitting there at 8.4 in Houston. Those are some of the cheaper quarterbacks that I like. Imani Bailey, one of my favorite running backs, aside from Taj Brooks, who I just mentioned in the core, but I love Imani Bailey. A little priced up on FanDuel at 9.3, but nowhere near the level that, would scare us away. I also think Audric Estime for Notre Dame is going to get a lot of touches against Duke. So that's another guy that you can pop in there that maybe gets way less ownership than he typically would because of the other options on this FanDuel slate. And then when it comes to wide receivers, if you're going to play Timmy McClain, it's been known to be mobile, but I like the prices of the receivers, man. Like UCF, I don't know what happened there with the pricing algorithm for UCF, but all of their guys really came out too cheap. You look at the matchup there going against Baylor, like this isn't the Baylor of yesteryear that we need to really be worried about. You look at the pricing of 5.4K for Javon Baker, that really allows you a ton of salary savings that you can easily, as I mentioned, pay up at quarterback. But even the 8K price tag for Kobe Hudson, for example, is really quite nice as well. You should be able to fit either of those guys in relatively easy. So I think the UCF mini stack on FanDuel, it's something that I like as well. Obviously, your main build, you're just plugging Caleb Williams. You're plugging in Jaden Daniels, and then you're moving on. But you're looking for some secondary lineups or some differentiation. The UCF mini stack, I think, is really going to kind of catch some people by surprise, and we'll see what happens there with that. Also, from the Ole Miss side, at wide receiver, you have Zachary Franklin sitting there at 6K. Did play actually a ton of snaps last week. He was at 60 in his first game back there for Ole Miss. I have heard and read, it could be coach speak, that Caden Prieskorn, another QB turned tight end, we love our tight ends here, is going to be ramped up snaps wise. So Prieskorn will get a lot of on-field time as well, along with Franklin, which is encouraging because they're obviously going to need him against, or all of those guys against LSU. Prieskorn is only 4.8 on FanDuel. And based off of what I read and what I believe and what I know about his talent, as long as he's not, pulled right before lock or something, 4.8 is way too cheap for him. I would main team Caden Prieskorn, depending on what it got you the rest of the way. But FanDuel, very, very soft pricing this week. There is really nothing you can't do on FanDuel. You can play pretty much anyone that you want to, which is typically what we say on DraftKings, right? But not so much this week. The pricing is a little bit better there on FanDuel. All right. Couple people asking about the other Jay Daniels, Jalen. Definitely fine. I don't have any issue there if you want to use him for GPPs. It does appear, and we mentioned this on Thursday, it does appear Xavier Weaver will give it a go and play against USC. Kind of expected that. Was looking at that news closely because if he couldn't go, it really made, to me, Jimmy Horn Jr. at 6'6", one of the top plays because he was just going to get peppered with targets. Weaver has a massive target share, so I'm less interested in Horn other than GPP. Again, it feels very odd not having massive exposure to a total of 73.5, but that's where we're at. Other sneaks, and then I'll just go get into ownership here. The Penn State running backs, I had mentioned, Singleton and Kentron Allen. They're both super expensive on DraftKings, over $7K for what they've been doing, but it's Northwestern that they're playing. And on the Northwestern side, Penn State's defense is borderline amazing at times. They're going to find life very difficult. I do really like this Cam Johnson price, 4.2K. And I always like my guy, AJ Henning, sitting there at 4.8. Henning has been scoring touchdowns back-to-back games. He's gotten about 5 to 7 targets. He's getting a few carries. They're trying to work him in and get him the ball any way that they can. He's actually scored at least 1 touchdown in 3 straight games now. One was a rushing a few weeks back against UTEP, and he's been right around 13 to 15 DK points as well. So I am a big fan of AJ Henning. You're looking for a total differentiation play that nobody's going to be looking at. You have those two guys for sure. And Cam Johnson, just as far as PPR goes, he continues to get work. Let me pull up. I don't spend too much time talking about Northwestern, but this is one of those spots that I have to make sure I don't do anything rash and play either of those guys in my main, but they were looking solid against Minnesota. Let me tell you, 9 targets for AJ Henning, 8 for Cam Johnson. You had even Bryce Kurtz there with 12. He was doing stuff, 10 catches, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns. Don't mind Kurtz, but honestly, Henning and Johnson are too cheap, and they're going to have to be getting targets, getting touches, on the field for this Northwestern team to really do anything, because Penn State's likely going to take Kurtz out of the mix, and they're going to make one of those guys, Henning or Johnson, beat them underneath, and they can rack up a lot of PPR points for sure. Yeah, team total of 8. I know. It's pretty wild, isn't it? Pretty wild. But unless we think they're going to get 50 total yards or something, one of those guys, Henning or Johnson, is going to put up a passable PPR game for sure. That is a guarantee. I'm not hanging my hat on it or anything, but they're gonna get some points here, some fantasy points at least. All right, let's take a look at the projected ownership, or what I think it's going to be. Just circle back to Discord real quick, make sure I'm not missing anyone there. Nope, we're good. All right, so right now, Caleb Williams, this is what I think it to be. Caleb Williams, the number 1 highest owned quarterback, expensive, of course, but really the only logical way to get exposure to a high total game of 70 plus points. USC, regardless of the news with Branch, still have too many options, too many mouths to feed. The running backs, they're still basically splitting. I know touches have been kind of veering towards Lloyd, but they're still playing a lot. So really the best way is Caleb Williams, hoping he gets some rushing touchdowns, hoping he throws 303 and kind of just sprinkles the ball around to his various targets as he does. So Caleb Williams, Seth Hennigan has come up a lot since Wednesday. Hudson Card, who I feel like the industry is just being stubborn on. They're going to keep plugging Card in. Hey, he's cheap. The matchup's passable. Let's keep rolling him. Luke Altmaier, I think we'll see some ownership just because he's so cheap, and that matchup against Purdue is so juicy. I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be 40%, but I think he will turn in 15 to 20% to surprise some people and be, in that top 5. I think that's really the quarterback group that we'll see. By the way, another quarterback sneak is Max Johnson. I know it's tough at 8-2. You couldn't play him over Hennigan, but I think he comes in against Arkansas and puts up 25 fantasy points, and he has plenty of receiving options to throw the ball to and a returning tight end. That has been awesome. All right, at running back, no secret, we know Genty and Blake Watson are going to be ridiculously high owned. And when I say ridiculously, I mean truly for a 12-game slate. You never like to stare down the barrel of a 65, 70% owned player, but I don't know how they're not. They're just way too easy to place at their price point, and the matchup's great. The usage will be there. So those two guys, Jonathan Brooks of Texas, and then I think Will Shipley is getting a lot more chatter than I thought he would, so I'll wedge him in there. And then I do think with the pricing the way it is, Blake Corum ends up being in the top 5 for highest owned running backs. We'll see how that goes. Wide receivers, Juice Williams, definitely Brock Bowers, especially on FanDuel, but it's talking DraftKings here for ownership. Jeremiah Hunter, and then it gets real wacky after that. I think we're talking about probably my guy Jatavian Sanders because of how cheap he is. Likely one of the Colorado guys, whether that's Horn or Weaver, just because of that condensed target share. And then I think we'll see a bunch of like 5% Rock Taylor, 7% Andrew Armstrong. Like that's going to be all over the board there. So you'll have some imaginative type builds after the Juice Williams, Hunter, Brock Bowers, and Colorado guys group. So that's what we're working with here. All right. Let's go over here. Just check PrizePicks. I still have the Garrett Schrader over 23.5 fantasy points. I'm also clinging to it was plus 100 on his anytime touchdown prop just earlier this morning, and I'll check and see if it still is. Other PrizePicks I like, Chandler Morris, my boy. They have that passing plus rushing combo. He's just been automatic, like 300 plus yards combo. So they have him sitting there at 264.5 passing plus rushing yards. We're taking the over. Michael Penix, we should just call him Heisman. Michael Heisman, over 3.5 passing touchdowns. He will absolutely brutalize Arizona later tonight. And then I like this. This is a little sneaky one for me. Timmy McClain over 20.5 fantasy points. I don't know. I like this UCF team. No JRP. No time to panic. No reason to panic. Timmy McClain has been pretty damn solid. We'll roll with our guy, Timmy McClain, over 20.5 fantasy points. All right. A few bets, and I'm going to have even more. Took it in the shorts with Brennan Armstrong, unfortunately. Garrett Schrader, anytime touchdown. We're still riding that. Let's see what else we got for anytime touchdowns. Let me get you the Colston Loveland one because I'm married to the play at this point. I'm married to Colston Loveland anytime touchdown. Let me just see what we're gonna get. Plus 230 anytime. Absolutely. Throw a little sprinkle on that one. It's not. I'd love to get back to the plus 450 anytime touchdowns that we had early in the season, but they're being a little bit stingy there. But yeah, plus 230 Colston Loveland anytime touchdown. Certainly. Maybe parlay that with a little Garrett Schrader action, and you got yourself a solid little bet there with lots of upside. Compare it to like Ashton Genty, who is minus 310 and is just a goddamn touchdown machine. Yeah, you can see that we've got some value here on my guy, Colston Loveland. All right, we will just get ready to wrap it up here. I'm just going to double check a few DMs that I had with some questions here. I just want to get those answered on air so everybody has their opportunity. Someone asked, 4 running backs can I run with Jonathan Brooks, Blake Watson, Ashton Genty, and Wiggity Will Shipley? If you're going to do 4 running backs, that's a good 4 to roll with. Chalk City, but yeah, Shipley. I don't know. I used to like Shipley a lot more. I don't know. I'm really sour on this Clemson team, I guess, and maybe I'm respecting Syracuse too much. But theoretically, Shipley should get a lot of work. But I'm not excited at all by him, to be honest. Early only FanDuel. Let me get back in the right screen. They've got a little bit of a different thing going on. Oh, by the way, if you're playing that, Darius Taylor, let me pull this up. Darius Taylor for Minnesota, not playing, it appears. So that is a huge bump up to Sean Tyler, who hasn't quite been to the level that I think a lot of us expected when he transferred over from WMU, but Taylor had turned into a monster of a player. Typically Minnesota does really well with these, Mo Ibrahim types. He's out the mix. Sean Tyler sitting there 8-4. It's not the best price in the world, but it's definitely passable. So for early only, I like that there. But Will Shipley also 8-6 on the early only on FanDuel, which is of course probably got to play him there. That's the situation with the running backs. The top quarterbacks on early only, still Caleb Williams. I I like the idea of playing my dude Garrett Schrader, but you got KJ Jefferson at 8.5 there. I think that's probably a good way to build it with Caleb Williams, who's massively almost 13K, and then you get a big discount there with Jefferson, which works your way through there. And then there was the kid for Arkansas, where's he at here? Where's he at? I believe it was the tight end. I don't want to say the wrong name here. Luke Haas. I believe he's good to go, right? Yeah, 7.4. Obviously, probably won't do that again, but he did catch all 6 of his targets last week against a tough LSU squad, 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. Actually scored a touchdown in back-to-back games. He did it the week before against BYU as well, another defense that is at least passable. So, some development happening here between KJ and his tight end, Luke Haas. I know the thing for tight ends around here, I know, but I like him on that early-only slate for FanDuel as well. Definitely do not turn your back on him. He certainly has some high floor, high upside potential there in this matchup. All right, I think that's it. That's a good spot to wrap it up. We have 15 minutes left before lock. I think I'm about locked in. Main injury questions have mostly been answered, I think. Again, we will have coverage for the 6-game night slate in the article, and the Discord coverage for the 3-game late night slate. There is some news to monitor for that one. Arizona, Jaden Delora, and Michael Wiley, 2 key pieces of the offense for Arizona, are game time decisions. Really, not to sound pompous, if they play or they don't play, the Huskies are still going to curb, but that would be real bad for them. And that would hurt Heisman, Michael Heisman's chances of putting up a big score if Delora can't play, because Arizona probably won't be able to move the ball at all. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it as always. Good day ahead. I think we are going to absolutely smash next week. Just so you're aware, there are games starting, I believe, on Wednesday. Yes. So there will be an article each and every day that there are games. I get asked this in DM sometimes, and in the Discord and on Twitter and everywhere else. To answer that question, if there is a slate on a weekday, we will have coverage for it. That is our pledge to you. We will have coverage for it. So multiple articles next week. Betting as well. You can get over to ftnbets.com, check the bet tracker, which is free to see as well. And then, of course, we'll be back next Thursday night, 9 p.m. PST, midnight EST, for the Week 6 breakdown. Things are just flying. We are less than 36 days away from college basketball. It's getting wild around here. Get some rest later. Take your nap. I think I'll get a nap in, but I'll be much more visible this week. I don't have as much going on. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care and best of luck.